Hi, we're out on the range, so please bear with gunfire here in the background. And today we're talking about PCCs and caliber 9x19. A while ago we did a presentation on having a handgun and a rifle or carbine in the same caliber and some of the advantages and disadvantages of that. But recently some people have contacted me with specific observations and questions about 9mm carbines. Such as, if you load your carbine with what would be considered typical 9mm ammo, just how much more velocity does it give you compared to the handgun? Also, in a handgun, a lot of people are of the opinion that 147 grain projectiles are the way to go. But what kind of performance can we expect out of a carbine? And recently we did a presentation with this Underwood Extreme Defender ammunition, caliber 9x19 plus P with a 65 grain non-expanding projectile. And we got good results out of the handgun, but the question came up, what kind of results will we get with the carbine? And would this be a good caliber for hunting deer? Well, I've got my carbine, I've got some various types of ammunition. Let's see if we can answer those questions, and maybe a couple more. I've got the chronograph set up at 7 yards, and we'll start with my Beretta Model 92FS, and I've got it loaded with Remington green and white box 9x19 115 grain full metal jacket. $11.17. 11.45, 11.61, 11.45, 11.37, and 11.45. Let's see how that compares to the carbine. Now we'll try the Beretta CX4 Storm Rifle, which is also loaded with the Remington green and white box 115 grain full metal jacket. $13.16. $13.27. $13.16. $13.12, $13.35, and $13.39. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Forgive the redundancy, but the concept here is that when your propellant combusts, pressure is built up and it starts forcing the projectile down the barrel. The longer the barrel is, the more time the projectile spends in the barrel, thus the more time you have for complete combustion and more pressure buildup. So simply put, the longer barrel you have, the more velocity you'll get, up to a point. We see that here with our Remington 115 grain projectiles, and that with the handgun we got a mean velocity of 1,141 feet per second. As where with the carbine we got a mean velocity of 1,324. That's a net gain of 183 feet per second, definitely more. Is it enough more to make a difference? Yes. But that's with our 115s. Let's try 147 grain projectiles and see what kind of results we get. Now I'll try this Winchester White Box 9x19 147 grain jacket at hollow point. $979. $988. $985. $976. $954. $960. Now let's see how that compares to the carbine. And now the Winchester 147 grain out of our CX4 Storm Rifle. $11.11. $11.15. $11.30. 1101, $11.18, and $11.20. Now let's go crunch those numbers. With our heavier projectiles, we expect to see lower velocities, and what we got was a mean velocity with the pistol of 973 feet per second, and with the carbine, 1,115. That's a net gain of 142. Again, more, and enough more to make a difference. One of the concerns about 9mm carbines is hollow point expansion. As I've said before, hollow points are velocity based. The faster you propel them, the more expansion you'll get, up to a point. If you propel a hollow point bullet too slowly, it drops below expansion threshold. You'll get very little to no expansion, so a detriment to overall effectiveness. But if you propel it too fast, you can get so much expansion, you can get bullet fragmentation, and it can really cost you penetration, creating a detriment to overall effectiveness. When reputable manufacturers like Sig Sauer make ammunition like this Sig Sauer Elite Performance V-Crown, which is 9x19 115 grain jacketed hollow point, they design and construct the projectile in such a way to give you a good balance between expansion and penetration when the projectile is propelled at the velocities at which they expect it to be propelled, such as what you'd get out of a 3, 4, 5-inch pistol barrel. We know that when we put it in our carbine, we're going to significantly increase that velocity. Will that significantly increase our effectiveness, or will we get so much expansion that we lose penetration and it creates a detriment to overall performance? Well, to test that, we're going to use the meat target. Forgive the redundancy, but this is leather jacket skin, followed by pork steak pectoral, pork ribs, a watermelon to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers of t-shirt on the back, and the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. I'll go back 7 yards and use our Beretta CX4 Storm rifle and the Sig Sauer Elite Performance ammunition. Let's see what kind of result we get. Well, there's the damage to our ribs on the front. Annihilated our watermelon lung tissue. As far as the ribs on the back, all 3 projectiles went completely through. Where they hit the ribs, broke them. And all 3 projectiles were stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target. Let me show you a close-up of them. And you can see that every projectile has outstanding expansion and no fragmenting. So we see that with the right ammunition selection, shooting 115 grain hollow points in your 9mm carbine definitely enhances the effect, but does not necessarily enhance your chances of overpenetration. Now there's still the question of using our Underwood Extreme Defender ammunition for deer hunting. And remember, this is 9x19 plus P with a 65 grain truncated screwdriver projectile. And for this we'll shoot the deer meat target. Now this is not just leather jacket skin, but leather jacket and pig ears to simulate the thicker hide of the deer. Pork ribs behind that, 2 lungs, because you typically shoot deer from the side, more pork ribs on the back, and of course followed by the new fleece bullet stop. And with this ammunition I'll shoot from 25 yards. Well, we've got some pretty big holes in the ribs in the front of the target, and where the projectiles hit the ribs broke them. Extensive damage to both our watermelon lungs. One of the projectiles didn't really hit center, and it was deflected enough it did not hit the ribs on the back of the target. But of the 2 that did, one was stopped by the plastic on the back of the ribs, and one made it a few layers into the fleece. So we see sufficient penetration and a lot of damage. Let me show you a close-up of the 2 projectiles I recovered. And here's our Phillips screwdriver looking projectiles that don't appear to be deformed at all. So overall, I'd have to say that our Extreme Defender ammunition performed extremely well. There's a couple of things I'd like to add. First, when we shot the meat target with the Sig Sauer Elite Performance ammunition, we got very good results. And that's similar to the results I've gotten from other 115 grain jacketed hollow points. But remember, not all 9mm ammo is created equal, and you have to test whatever ammunition you choose to use. Another thing is that this particular rifle, and I do not mean Beretta CX4 Storm rifles in general, I mean this particular one. When I change ammunition and change bullet weights, it changes my point of impact just a little bit. However, with many of the PCCs I've used over the years, when you change ammunition, especially when you change projectile weight, the change in point of impact can become profound. You have to figure out whatever ammunition you're going to use and then zero your rifle with that. And this is really applicable when you're going to be practicing with relatively inexpensive ammo and then carrying very expensive ammo. Which brings us to the concept of hunting deer with your Extreme Defender ammunition. Why would you hunt deer with a 9mm? Generally speaking, I'd say you shouldn't. However, when the topic was brought up, it was brought up in the guise of perhaps that being a good option for an inexperienced shooter or a kid. Well, in the state that I live in, generally speaking, someone has to be at least 12 years old to hunt big game like deer or elk. However, in some states, under some circumstances, they have what they call youth hunts for kids that are like 9 or 10 years old. And although none of my crew killed a bar when they were only 3, one of them did in fact shoot a deer when he was 9 and did so with a PCC. Of course, his was a .357 Magnum, not a 9mm. I have shot deer with 9mm, and again, generally speaking, I'd recommend not doing it. But based on today's results with the deer meat target, this Extreme Defender ammunition may be a game changer in that sense. You just have to remember that it's a non-expanding projectile, so you have to make sure that it adheres with your local laws and adheres with your personal sense of deer hunting ethics. Another thing I'd like to say is that although a while ago we did a presentation that briefly discussed some of the advantages and disadvantages of PCCs, you should not infer that anything we did today was any kind of recommendation. There are a lot of different viewpoints on the usefulness of PCCs. I have several of them, and under the right conditions I find them very useful. Some people vehemently disagree with me. So, as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the 9mm carbine video.